Hi, my name is Colin Ryan, and this presentation is on the Fair Information Practice Principles. So this is just a quick overview of what this presentation is going to cover. So we're going to look at what is Fair Information Practice Principles, how do these principles compare to other privacy policies, laws, and regulations, and how can these principles be useful in protecting personal identifiable information, and how could a federal agency use these principles? So what are fair information practice principles? So these are just guidelines on how to handle personal data. And it's a set of 8 principles regarding data collection, use, and privacy. So we have the collection limitation principle, data quality principle, purpose specification principle, use limitation principle, security safeguards principle, openness principle, individual participation, and accountability. Now we're going to take a look at each one of these principles individually. So for the collection limitation principle, this personal data collection should have limits. Data shouldn't be collected more than what's needed and only collected with knowledge and consent from the subject. Then we have the data quality principle. Personal data should be relevant for the purpose that it's being collected for. For the purpose specific principle, purpose of personal data collection should be specified at or before the time of collection. So the purpose should not be specified after data is already being collected. And the use limitation principle, personal data should not be disclosed without the consent of the subject. The security safeguard principle states personal data should be protected securely with safeguards in place. Openness principle states personal data practices and policies need to be transparent with the subject. Individual participation principle. An individual should have the right to confirm what data relates to them, have communication about that data, and changes to the policy. Also, they should be able to challenge any data related to them. And then last principle we have is accountability principle. The data controller is accountable for complying with all these principles we just discussed. So now let's summarize the fair information practice principles. So transparency. You need to have transparency with the subject you're collecting data with. They should know how the data is collected, what it's being used for. There shouldn't be any hidden agendas or complex privacy notices to confuse the subject. Data quality and integrity. You need to make sure the data you're collecting isn't misused, changed, deleted. You need to ensure quality and integrity, individual participation. The subject needs to fully consent. It needs to be clear, not tricked into agreeing to anything they didn't want to. Security. You need to offer security with this data you're collecting and handling. So this could be ways such as encryption, and then we have specification. You need to specify what's being collected, the purpose, and this needs to all be done before the data starts being collected. Accountability, you're accountable when collecting data to uphold all these principles and to ensure that the subject is aware of what is all going on. Data minimalization, so you need to collect only the data that's relevant. You shouldn't be collecting just all the data you can. You won't be able to analyze it, plus it could pose more security risks. And then auditing, you need to go through your procedures, policies, and audit and make sure everything is adhering to these principles. So how does the Fair Information Practice Principles compare to other privacy laws and regulations? So I listed a few right here. We have the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. This protects patient-sensitive information from being disclosed without consent. The Gramm-Leach-Blye Act. This requires financial institutions to explain how data is shared and to safeguard that sensitive data. The Electronic Communications Privacy Act, this regulates when electronic communications can be intercepted, monitored, or reviewed by third parties. And then the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, who can request educational records and they have the right to inspect them. So we definitely see some similarities in here. You see that data needs to be safeguarded, sensitive data, and it can't be disclosed without consent. You need the subject's consent as well as the individual. When your data is being collected, you have the right to inspect it, request it. So that's some similarities compared with these. Now we're going to take a look at the Fair Information Practice Principles with personal identifiable information and federal use. So for personal identifiable information, using these principles reduces the individual's privacy risks. You're seeing how your data is accessed and shared. You need to get full consent. It needs to be open and transparent. And as well, the companies have to practice safeguards, put in encryption and other methods to make sure your data is being handled correctly. You also have the rights to request your data, see how it's being handled. So how could a federal agency use this? Well, if we look at each principle, if a federal agency followed this, their collection limitation, they would only collect what's needed. They would ensure data quality by ensuring integrity, data is not misused, changed, deleted, and they would propose their specification, what it's being collected for, as well as implement safeguards such as encryption and other things. Openness, you need consent of the user, and then accountability. Just following all these principles ensures the subject who's giving their data up that it can be trusted and safe. They can see it. And overall, trust is key, especially comes with the government and collecting its citizens' data. You need trust there. And this is a list of the references I use. Thank you for listening to my presentation.